Hello, friends and folks, and welcome back to another episode of Neutral Game, your newbie-friendly fighting game podcast. I'm Six Detmar from Scanline Media.
Hi, and I'm Real Sweet Bear, aka Mealdrug. Hi.
And we're here to talk about a fighting game that I think, certainly I hadn't heard of before we covered it for this, and it's probably a little less popular than some of the stuff we usually cover. We're here to talk about Touhou 12.3 Hisoutensoku.
Yep. This is more... I think Scarlet Weather Rhapsody was maybe a bit more known than this, but this is essentially the sequel or the game built on top of that.
Yeah, it's the Super Street Fighter 2 to Street Fighter 2 for Scarlet Weather Rhapsody, basically. So this is a Touhou game, and I think a lot of people have heard that name and have varying degrees of understanding about what Touhou is. Basically, back on the PC-98. You know the PC-98? Classic.
I know a lot about it because there's a lot of very cool gifs of games for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it had a great art style. That was both prevalent on it and also what its graphics chip made possible. Was primarily a Japanese computer system, and there was a guy named Junya Ota, also known as Zun, who made some shmup games. The beginning of the Touhou series over there, and they did fairly well. And eventually, they're sort of like bullet hell shmup games, and the franchise got the good fan reaction, and Junya kind of promoted this and sort of was like, hey, this is I'm gonna keep making these games, but also fans, you should make stuff too. This is sort of for all of us, and it became this collaborative project, the Touhou project. The main releases are all shmups, but there are a bunch of spin-offs of all sorts of genres. There's a Double Dash style kart racer. There are multiple fighting games. There's all sorts of stuff. This is one of the fighting games.
Yes, I also think, wasn't the very, very first one an Arkanoid clone? Or am I misremembering?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Yeah, but yes, it is primarily a very shmuppy game, and a lot of the spin-off games, not all of them, but a lot of them do try to incorporate that aspect of the franchise into the fan works and spin-offs, and this is no exceptions.
Yeah, so what we have here is I don't think it's quite bullet hell, right? Like, often Touhou games are bullet hell, and this doesn't get quite to that level. I wouldn't say there are that many shots on screen, but this is that, like, bullet focused, but a fighting game.
Yeah, like, and it's also, this is more closer to a fighting game than a like shmup in the sense of on the scale, because there's also some versus games that are very shmuppy, both some old PS1 style games, but also like indie ones like or arcade ones like Twinkle Star Sprites and so on, which are straight up versus shmup games. This is more along the lines of a very classic style fighting game with some differences.
Yeah, some rather strange differences, I think. And that's, I think, a lot of what we're going to want to talk about here, because this is, as a fighting game, it just has a lot of unusual systems and solutions to problems, right?
Yeah, and I think before we just go in, just a quick disclaimer for viewers, we have played this, like, a few sessions of this, messed around with it, and I did play Scarlet Weather Rhapsody way back in the day. Like, it's a pretty old game. But we are not obviously, like, experts or an authority on this title, so just keep that in mind when we're talking about it.
Yeah, I don't imagine there are a ton of experts out there in the West for this game. Probably not in the East either. I mean, it's one of 6 Touhou fighting games that came out. But yeah, we put time in, we tried to do our homework, but we have our limits. So
exactly. Also, I do not remember the names of all the characters. I'm sorry.
Wow.
I remember the one I liked the most. Isn't that like always the point of these like
you're not even trying.
Anime girl style franchises? You pick one and it's like, oh yeah, she's my favorite.
Well, you can't like call her your waifu, because I think she's... Well, I mean, I guess she's not human, so I don't know how old she is.
But... I didn't call her my waifu.
I know, but
I specifically avoided that word. Okay.
But you evoked the imagery.
Look, I can appreciate someone's aesthetic.
Sure.
And speaking of characters, who's your favorite Touhou? I just want to know before we go in.
I mean, I spent a lot of time with Yomu Kanpaku, who is who's like a half human, half ghost, double swords gardener. She was pretty cool. However, late on, I also discovered Sakuya Izuyoi, who is like an aloof maid who throws a billion knives, and that seemed pretty cool to me too.
Yeah. I'm Team Ibuki. I appreciate a demon that can hold her drink.
Yeah, she we'll talk about the balance of this game. Ominous statement. But yeah, this is a game where, I mean, okay, there's no throw button in this game.
Well, there's a dodge button, but yes, there are three main buttons in this game. The throw, well, four, yes, but in more sense of functionality, like the base functionality of your character is usually two types of projectiles, a melee attack and a dodge, and essentially, the dodge is there to help you graze through bullets and avoid taking damage from them. The bullets are there to interrupt melee attacks, and melee attacks are there to punish dodges. And, like, on paper at least, that's usually how it's meant to work.
Mm-hmm. And so yeah, it's a really interesting, like, having not just a one button projectile, which is fairly unusual, but does happen in some fighting games. You know, you've got like Dragon Ball Fighters and stuff, but two buttons. You have like weak and strong projectile, but only one button for melee, and that I feel like should tell you a lot about what this game is going for. You know?
Yeah, the inputs are also a bit interesting because they are a mix between Smash style directional inputs where you do direction plus button to get a thing, but also you actually have special move motion. So you have, you'll have a different projectile for a lot of characters if you press forward plus projectile versus neutral plus projectile. But if you do like Dragon Punch or down forward projectile, you'll just get a special move.
I mean, I guess I didn't think of that as being very Smash-like. I mean, it doesn't seem any different than like how you get a different move from Ryu if you hit heavy punch or forward heavy punch.
I guess, yeah, yours probably makes more sense. I just associate anything with flashy move with button plus direction to be very Smash-like, but that's just me.
I mean, you do have to get into the mentality of like when I press like forward and, like C, and it spawns like 6 bullets in like a wave pattern that like shoot out one by one. That's a normal. And it's weird to think that way. But,
it is.
They're normals.
It is. I mean, they are also limited by how much you can use them because you do have a sort of magic meter that depletes, so you can't just completely offload, but that magic meter replenishes very quickly. I think it's mostly there as a limiter, so you don't just, spam projectile forever.
Mm-hmm. Which you still can do. It's just you have to be a little more measured about it.
Yeah, you have to kind of like space it out a bit.
You have to charge the spirit bomb before throwing it at me.
Exactly.
Another thing that's weird about this game is it has there's a match timer, but it's not to like round end. It's just for rotating through weather effects.
Yeah. So yeah, the timer goes upwards up to 99, and from 0 to 99, and then whenever it reaches 99, a new weather effect starts. And I think there's some weathers where it's just nothing happens, but in most cases there's some minor or major gameplay altering effect. So there might be something like specials are cheaper; they cost like 1 meterless, or you have and like health drain on your damage, where you can like 50% of your damage or something like that you heal from hitting the opponent. And then there's some really wild stuff like just armor. Like everybody has armor, and it turns into a massive, ridiculous bashing fest.
Yeah, you have infinite super armor, you don't take hits done, and you cannot block. And so you're just like, what is my most like damaging normal? I will hit that over and over.
Yeah. Or even like a special if you try and bait them not to dodge. But yes, there are some effects that just, break the game. And there's also some effects that are kind of tug of war. I can't remember what it does, but there is a sort of like, I think, calm, which affects one person. There's kind of like a beam of sunlight on them, and then if you hit them, you take that beam of sunlight away from them.
Yeah, it slowly heals your health bar, so it's like whoever last landed a hit is slowly getting healed. It's it's certainly an interesting mechanic, and I think it also spells out like this isn't supposed to be a super hardcore competitive game. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a mechanic like this, right?
Yeah, it feels less impactful than say items, in some fighting games, but it feels more impactful than say the environmental things in NetherRealm games like Mortal Kombat or Injustice. So it's kind of like somewhere in between of those two, in my opinion. I don't mind it per se. I do think that I appreciate when fighting games experiment with these things a bit more. I'm still of the opinion that stages should matter. But I don't really like it either. I don't know what your thoughts on it are.
I mean, I think it's I agree with you. I think it's neat when they experiment with this sort of thing. I felt like I wasn't able to capitalize on the effects most of the time, or they were obnoxious, right? We've called out Typhoon as being particularly obnoxious with the armor thing, but there's also like River Mist, where just like you're just randomly tugged and pushed around the battlefield. I think the thing it says is like distance becomes strange, and you just start sliding around randomly, and that's very annoying. We haven't talked about the card system yet, the spell cards, but there's one that randomizes your hand and hides it from you.
There's one that lowers your frame data, like makes everything slower.
I think for the most part they're annoying. I like the idea. I don't like the execution very much.
I think that's kind of where I stand, because for me, I don't feel like I can play too much around them, but there's also there's just a lot of information overload, right? It's not like you go into a stage, with the knowledge of, this is the active weather for this stage, or the weather options for this stage. It's more just, hey, all the weathers that exist in the game are available at all times, and you just have to memorize all these effects. It's kind of weird for when you're a beginner and you don't understand fully what's happening. You're already trying to process the characters, the moves, the card system, and now on top of all of that, it just says, click fog, and you're just like, what's that? I don't know.
It's also annoying it's also annoying for certain matches, right? Like when you're playing a zoner against a rushdown character, and then, Typhoon hits, and you're like, okay, it's impossible for me to keep them out now.
Yeah.
They're just guaranteed to get in now. And also because there are no throws in the game, there's no easy way to create distance in those situations. So
I think in a lot of cases is how beneficial a weather is. It's solely dependent on how much health you have at the given moment.
Yeah. So I like the idea, don't love the execution, which I think honestly is sort of a quick way of referring to a lot of this game for me, but yeah.
I can get behind that. I feel I wish it was a bit smoother in its design. I think as it is, at least it's not as bad where you'll go, oh god, this is unplayable. It's more along the lines of, this is just kind of annoying, but for most part, you can try and ignore it.
So another system we haven't talked about yet, I mentioned it briefly, is the spell card system. This game has deck building in it.
I love it. This is my favorite system of the game.
So basically, can you explain this?
Okay.
I feel like I would do a bad job.
All right. So this game has a deck building system where each character has their own deck of cards, and this deck is made up of two types of cards. There are character-specific cards, and there are system-level cards. The system-level cards are shared among all characters, so they affect things like the weather or global stats like how fast you can move, or just give you just like a general benefit like heal you slightly and so on. The character-specific ones are, as the name says, character-specific to your character. And what these cards do are, you have your hand, and you have a highlighted card that's kind of primary slot, and then you have the secondary slots, which is the rest of your hand. And each card you use consumes a number of cards. It can be just itself, or it can be, use this card and you need to pay another 2 cards to actually activate it. So how this game manages that is, it'll highlight in your the corner in this sort of special UI. It'll highlight your current card. You can toggle through them, and it'll tell you, hey, if you use this card, these next ones are gonna activate. And if you can't use your card, it's just not highlighted. And then those cards themselves are broken down into a few things. You have actually it's 2 things. They're broken down into special moves, and they're broken down into super moves. Super moves are like the name says, it's just standard issue fighting game super move. What the special move cards do is they either upgrade your special, or they swap out your special for something else. So for example, let's say you have a fireball projectile, down forward something, and it's just like a standard issue fireball. You can, if you slot into your deck cards that are that special move, you can use it and it'll level up for the rest of the match, not just a round, and you can just have a stronger fireball. But if you slot in a alternate move, then you will get that move instead. So it'll be like in my case, it'll be a spirit bomb style projectile instead. And which move replaces which is predetermined. So I think it's usually you have 2 special moves per execution slot. So it's like down forward projectile, everybody has 2. DP, everybody has 2. Down something like the down button, everybody has 2. In general, if you have an input, you have 2 moves for it.
Well, you have 2 extra options. You have 3 usually.
Oh, do you have 3 options for a slot? Okay, yeah. My bad then.
Or at least for most of the ones I checked.
Okay, my bad then. And usually you can download a save file online that just unlocks all the cards for you, because you just get them by playing if you don't want to grind. With how you set up a deck is you just attach it to your profile. So when you load up the game in Versus Mode or online, you're essentially loading up your save game profile, and that profile also has whatever custom decks you've made. Everybody comes with a default deck, but if you want to sort of adapt it to your play style, you can. And I think there's also some deck building limitations, you're allowed to have, I think, 20 cards total, and you're only allowed to have 4 copies of a card, so you can kind of balance out what you actually want to do. That's basically the system.
Yeah, and I think in theory you could also just be like, hey, I'm gonna put all 3 of my fireball move in my deck and switch as the situation calls for, but you're probably not gonna draw the card you want when you want it. So
yes. So the card drawing is randomized, as is card games in general. There are also some minor things about it, if you use a special move card, depending on the special move, your character might actually just activate that card as well. So for example, if you have a DP special card, like a Dragon Punch, and you activate it to upgrade your Dragon Punch, your character will depending on the character, will actually execute it. So you might have a situation where you're holding off on upgrading your move to actually just get a one button reversal, and it's also kind of important because those cards that don't do that, they kind of leave you exposed. Like if you just upgrade some moves in neutral, your character will stand there and do the power up move, which means people can hit you.
But also it can work the other way where, like, I was playing Sakia, the knife maid, and I had a teleport move, and it seemed like that teleport was pretty good at higher levels. At lower levels, it was not great, and so I was trying to find opportunities to use the card to upgrade it, knowing that it would forcibly teleport me forward. And I did not get a good strategy for that, but I bet one could be found.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is also there's some trial and error involved in figuring out what moves actually work for you. I know the deck I made, I ended up realizing, this one special move I slotted in is actually worse than the default one I have, so I should probably switch that at some point.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, that's the system. I think it's pretty fun and engaging. It's almost it almost sort of feels like the weird character from a regular fighting game that might have such a system. Like you can imagine, a BlazBlue character having, or a Guilty Gear character having something like that, or like the card character.
Sure.
But it's interesting to see it as a global mechanic because it's definitely involved. It's the closest thing I can think of from an actual fighting game is the making your own move templates from Mortal Kombat, like Mortal Kombat 11 that lets you kind of slot in different moves for different things. But that is so lower level than so more accessible than this. Like it's so less involved because you have very few choices. And here, if you want to kit out your character, you need to pick 20 cards properly.
And I mean, also this is a fan-made game, and it isn't necessarily the best at explaining anything ever. So, there's a lot of... I fortunately found a wiki that had some information, not as much as you'd like, but, they're for such a, niche game, they did a great job. I'm certainly not trying to talk down. It's just I'm spoiled for, looking up stuff for Dragon Ball FighterZ where there's a treasure trove of information. But without that, it would have been so much harder than it already was to try and figure out a deck, Yeah,
I admit for me it's easier to grasp the character specific cards than the system level ones because the game is Japanese, but you can there's a fan patch that translates everything, and I went through all the cards on in the system category, and I'll be honest, I did not understand the value of them in 90% of the cases. It's not more just, it's not that they seem bad, it's more just, I don't understand, is this important or good or not? Like, obviously, there's healing, and I understand, okay, this will heal me, but is it good healing, or is it the bad healing that most fighting games have? I ended up only really slotting from the system side stuff that increases my movement speed, because that I could understand the value of.
Yeah, it's a little hard to parse some of that stuff.
But I think the actual special cards for the characters do explain, this move has long wind up or low recovery or is good in these situations. At least from what I remember at a glance, it seemed to do a good job of explaining, you should use these moves in these situations.
I kept booting up the Japanese version by accident, so I may not have seen that information. But which actually is an interesting thing. If you want to play this game these days, it works. Our matches went very smoothly. The netcode seemed pretty good, but that's because we were jumping through a lot of hoops to make it work.
Yes, there is a guide online on the wiki explaining what you need to download and which version you need to download, but there's also some additional software you may want, the translation patch. There is a specific one that enables like proper net play via IP, and there's like a second software that also helps additionally with that.
Yeah, so ultimately you have to download Scarlet Weather Rhapsody, which is the base game that this is an expansion to. Then you put this in, then you patch it to English, then you add a thing called Soku Roll, which helps with netcode, and then you auto punch it, which again helps with netcode. And then it's like, okay, now that you've done all of that, it works just fine. By the way, every time you run the game, you have to run Soku Roll and auto punch after the game is running to sort of like live patch it.
Yeah, because we forgot that in a few occasions. But when that works, then you just you host a server, you get a copy to clipboard command, and then you send the person the IP and the port, and then they connect to you. So it does have that also additional barrier of people who aren't really keen on sharing their IP. Like, obviously you should not share that in public spaces and so on. You should just message people directly for that. But when all of that is said and done, it works pretty smoothly. I did not notice really any issues on my end.
No, there were no real crash issues. The loads were very fast. The netcode seemed pretty good. Yeah, worked pretty well.
Yeah. Good on you, fans.
Yeah, good work. I do have a little bit of an issue with the fans who built the game, because I think the game has poor balance.
I will just let you explain yourself. I don't have a stake in this fight. Go ahead.
I just feel that when you give a character a full screen, extremely fast projectile that knocks back and knocks down, you should be rewarded for getting in on them, and I'm not.
To be fair, you were playing that katana lady in the green dress. And I tried playing her, and I kind of agree. I didn't really... I think I got a slightly better grasp on getting in, but it didn't feel ideal because it involved dash canceling into DPs on reaction.
Mm-hmm.
It almost reminded me of playing Naruto in BlazBlue, now that I think about it. But yeah, I can't really comment too much on the balance. I tried to look up some online matches from tournaments. I watched some Frosty Faustings matches as well. And, the way we played, it wasn't really extremely far removed from what the intended way of playing is. Obviously, we were not nowhere near the skill level of actual tournament players, but the game essentially does seem to be a lot of keep away and zoning, and then when you grab the opportunity, you go in for a combo.
Okay. I mean, like, I am mostly just venting some salt here. Like, it's a fan game. I don't I didn't come on here on our episode about fucking, Ultra Fight to Kyanto 2 to complain about the balance. It's not entirely fair for me to do it for this game, because given, it's just that I'm spoiled by games that are well balanced, honestly. Given what this is, I think it works extremely well. But I did have some fights that were not very fun.
So, what I think a big contributor to this is, because it's projectile based, instead of, say, close combat, juggle based, for example, like something like Tekken or whatever, I feel that projectile leads to an easier time of having just very cheap tactics on low level gameplay. You know how when you're learning a game and somebody plays a grappler and they just obliterate you because you don't know how to play around a grappler, and for them it's easy because they just do one input. I think it's almost kind of like that, because the projectiles are so accessible and the special moves are so accessible and they're very powerful. I just think that probably the learning curve for this is very mean.
Yeah, you're probably right. It can be pretty unforgiving, and when you're dealing with all these projectiles, there's just not a lot of room for error, I guess.
Like, like a good comparison to me is like you played Calamity Trigger, like Blaze Blue, right? The first one. Yeah, you know how it was when you play against a new player, like new 13. You're essentially just, I'm not sure how I meant to do anything versus this. But for them, it's pretty easy because they just have very accessible and powerful options from the get go. And then when people got better at understanding the game, and when they kind of balanced out the options so they weren't as as powerful for the zoners, then it got a bit easier. But I think this is almost kind of like that, where if somebody knows how to zone you out, it's less effort for them to figure out how to zone you out than for you to figure out how to get out of that zoning.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the long and short of it.
But I do like it. I think it's a very charming game in a lot of ways, even if I'm not a Touhou fan or aficionado.
I mean, it makes me want to check out some of the other Touhou fighting games, to be honest. I'm curious about Antimony of Common Flowers, which I believe is the most recent one from 2018, which is a fighting game where there is no ground.
Yeah, I think I played that one. Either that one or one that's in the similar style. That one is one I couldn't wrap my head around. I didn't know how to. I don't know how to think without a floor. I guess it's maybe it's meant for kind of hard players. I don't know.
Or maybe at some point we could figure it out together. I don't want to do it for our next episode. We can't do 2 Touhou games in a row. People will start to talk. But
I mean, I'm up for that. You'd probably beat me at that one because I don't know which one I tried, but it was basically the one where you just kind of float in the air and there's like, it almost feels like those old Mega Drive Dragon Ball games. But yeah, this one's more traditional, grounded fighter by comparison. So, anything else you want to mention?
No, not really. I mean, I think just going into this is a fairly old game, and it's like a fan-made game. So go in with people to play with, or you're not going to find any matches. Period.
Yeah, I think there are some communities, and the wiki does say like, oh, here's the official Discord or something. So it's one of those games where if you don't have anyone to play with, you need to find the Discord on the internet for it. Which personal preference, I don't usually do that, but I know people who don't mind. The other part of this being an old game is, if you run it in windowed mode, it's a very tiny window. If you run it in full screen mode, it's a very big window. And the sprites are nice, big, and chunky. I'm pretty sure that 90% of these sprites are the same ones I saw in Scarlet Weather Rhapsody in, mid-2000s when I played this. Which is fine because they're very nice looking sprites.
And also, it can be kind of difficult. Like, probably if you go to that Discord, you're going to get what you need. But getting all the software you need to make this thing work properly is actually kind of difficult. You're going to find a whole lot of dead links to Soku Roll downloads.
Yeah, I know we dug a bit deep until we found something.
But yeah, I think that's all I've got on this one. I am glad we checked this out. It's nice to check out games that are sort of just like trying very different answers to common fighting game problems. I don't know how much more I'm going to play of this game, but it was cool.
I enjoy playing this game once in a blue moon. That's about my take on it. Not because it's like bad, mostly because it's neat, and then I just go to my regular games.
I like throws. I like throws a lot.
Well, did you know that in the upcoming Nickelodeon Smash-like video game, you can grab and throw projectiles?
That sounds stupid.
It looks obscenely stupid, but in a funny, in a good way.
All right. Well, I haven't watched too much footage of that. I'm sure we'll talk about it. Maybe not on the pod. Like we'll see what happens. But when it comes out, you can bet that we'll take a look at it in some form. All right. Well, Miadrog, where can people find you on the internet?
So hello, you can find me on twitch.tv/RealSovietBear, and you can find me on twitter.com/MDKII. That's MDK Roman numeral 2.
Okay.
And where can folks find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Sixdettmar, SAXDETTMAR. You can also find my work at scanlinemedia.com or patreon.com/scanlinemedia. And until next time, folks, peace out.